So once it's all said and done, now you guys remember what the original sounded like. Let me just go back to the beginning and kind of give you guys a refresher. Just going to play the vocals. And we'll go towards the end here. So you guys can see why I kind of dug this track. I was like, this will be cool. Well, it ends up turning into this. Beautiful. Hang on, let me get something that'll actually play it. La la la. That's a little cymbalom, which is a hammered dulcimer. Sounds kind of different, huh? Me playing fake guitar. Oh, I shouldn't have said anything. Well, you got to sell it with the little like. It's got to slide. It must be real. Anyway, that's where the tune ended up at that point. Yeah. So, like I said, it's not a dance remix. It's this, it's this reimagining of the song taking the spirit of what was actually there and just trying to build it out, you know. And it's still not mastered, but I think we did a fairly good job. Yeah, it's good. I like that vocal a lot. So anyway, where was I? I think I wanted to say something about remixing, and I forgot what it was. But that's why I have my handy-dandy keynote, right? Oh, okay. What's the question?
The question was, what kind of drums were you using on that track?
That's actually a funny story. A lot of the students who have gone or are currently going to Pyramind may know this guy, Jason Martinez, J-Mart. Jason and I shared a studio for a little while, and he had this Sunlight drum kit. It's the cheapest bargain basement, like thrift store score of a drum set, right? And he went out and he got some mics and he mic'd it up, and he like threw a tambourine in the kick and like kicked it a whole bunch of times, and then he like played the snare a bunch of times, and just got every sound out of this thing possible. And we turned it into an EXS24 kit. And actually not even a kit, it's like there's like a whole 2 octaves of kick drum and 2 octaves of snares and 2 octaves of, it's like this crazy setup. And so what was kind of fun on this piece is I said I want this like chugga chugga chong. And somehow the tone that he got out of that with the little tambourine in it and like all the funky stuff that was like rattling around, and there's no head on it and it's like recorded in this funky way, it sounds awesome, right? It was totally this great score of a sound. So that's one of the tones as far as the drums are concerned. It's a thrift store drum kit that I went nuts on in Logic. Actually, Jason and I both did because he set up the initial EXS24 instrument and I kind of modified it slightly. But yeah, I mean, J-Mart, he's so great with that kind of stuff. He can get a sound out of, I'll be like, hey, can you make a sound out of this? And he'd be like, yeah, I hear a hit, So yeah, that's one of the things. I'm doing a little bit of low-end support using an East-West library. I think it was a Storm Drum to support the low end a little bit more. And there's actually some, there's an acetylene tank.
Every good sea change needs one.
Yeah, I mean, acetylene tanks. Acetylene tanks, there was a place next door to Pyramind called Tanner Welding. It had been there 150 years. And they were going to close it down. So I went in there, and I recorded everything I could find. I mean, I had my buddy Eric. Eric worked with both Frank and I at the Omni Circus, and he also worked with me in Scabaret and the stuff I've been doing with Aaron and Jeremy, who I'll get to in a little bit. He's like telling me they're going to shut down, and I'm like, let's get in there right now. So we went at like 2 in the morning. Nobody's there, and it's this enormous cavernous space. And we banged on acetylene tanks with rubber mallets and stuff, and like walked on metal and almost killed ourselves. It was totally awesome. I got these air drivers, and like I made some of the best industrial music back in that time just because I had all these samples from Tanner Welding. And it was also, I find that I get an emotional attachment with sound, with certain sounds that I find in certain places that have that have a characteristic to the way that they sound. And that Tanner Welding, when I'd go and visit Eric all the time, because I was working at Pyramind, so hey Eric, you want to get some lunch? Yeah, But the sounds of the welding and all the stuff that was going on in there, it was so cool to have this audio archive of that, and then be able to incorporate that in pieces. And every time I work on a new piece, I try to incorporate these sounds that have pretty deep emotional resonance with me. So acetylene tank. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on in there. And there are a couple library things too, like the frame drum I got from East West. What else did I use? Oh, some orchestral samples from a session that Paul here at Pyramind, we got this orchestra to do insane things. And so there's this clacking sound that's going on in there that's actually an orchestra. So.
What about that cello, that viola string sound?
Oh, the thing that was all by itself? It's fake. It's an Ezrash. It's a library sample of an Ezrash. You know, I wish I could say it was real. You know, my buddy Daniel, he's got an Ezrash, and they're very, 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 very hard to play. And the guys over at East West happened to make a sample that was very, like, you could really do exactly what you want with it. You know, you get as tweaky as you want. So yeah, those are some of the sounds that I incorporated into the piece that you heard. There's also, you know, standard pads. I also use a lot of Logic instruments, a lot of Logic synths that I process slightly, and those are the low pads that are happening. Usually I like to use Sculpture, or I'll use Sculpture, I'll use some of the EV series, just because Sculpture, you can have it do things that you just can't do with anything else in Logic. It's a physical modeling synth that's very, that you can do very rich sound with that no other synths work with. Because instead of using an oscillator or a sample, it's like, here's your virtual string. Do you want to pluck it? Do you want to drop something on it? Do you want to mute it? What do you want to do with this string? You know, it's like a whole different way of thinking about sound. So the Sculpture pads are where I was using from some of the line for that. So anyway, horn aplenty. That was the workflow behind it, and I hope that you enjoyed that portion of our show. It's kind of fun to see something go from 0 to hero, you know, like go from just like a lot of paint on the canvas to be really refined. And Frank and I worked very closely on that. Scoring a little to picture. Now this I want to, boy. I want to get to all this other stuff really fast, so I just want to talk about a couple of things when it comes to scoring to picture. One of the things is OMF files. An OMF can be printed from Final Cut Pro, Pro Tools. Most of the major DAWs that you get nowadays, you can export OMF, AAF, or XML. And there's another project that I'm working on right now where I'm having to mix. I'm doing the whole audio mix, the DM&E mix for this film, and the video editor's like, okay, I'll try and render this and render that. I'm like, dude, just give me an OMF. He's like, what? And goes in and it's like, it was awesome. I opened it right up. So this is how you use an OMF. An OMF, when you drag it into Logic, well, first of all, did I close that song? Yes, I did. Okay, good. It's important that Logic just be like kind of ready to go. Okay, so now what Logic's trying to ask me in my other screen set that's somewhere to be found. You see it trying to hide back there? There it is. That's what I get for using spaces. So it's asking me, basically the OMF file has all of the audio and sometimes the automation coming from the session that the editor is working with. In this case, it's a video editor. And I want to be able to extract that into a Logic session and get it to a place where I can work with it. So when you open the OMF file, I just drug it onto Logic to open it up. That's kind of the easiest way to do it. It's going to ask you where we put the assets for the OMF file. So I'm going to go into SFLN presentation. I'm going to go into this movie here. I'm going to make a new folder. I'm just going to call it OMF audio. And I'm going to hit choose. Now, very important. Do you want to convert the imported audio file sample rates to Logic sample rate of 44.1? Right now, since I drug it into Logic, it's opening a default template in Logic that happens to be at 44.1. That's your sample rate. Now, let's just very quickly hit sample rate once again. Okay, sample rate is kind of like when you're working in film. If you have a camera whose shutter is going like this, capturing images, and then you play it back, use a projector that's showing those images at the same rate as you're capturing them, correct? Does that make sense? Yeah. So your sample rate is the audio version of that, okay? So if you've got a camera, you know, your audio camera, your audio device, it's listening. So you got a mic that goes to a preamp that goes to your audio interface, and it's snapping snapshots at 44,100 times per second. If you play it back at a rate of 48, it's just not going to work, right? That just totally makes sense, doesn't it? So in this case, it's asking me if I want to convert all the audio. Well, I don't want to do that, because if I do, I'm going to lose all the timing that this guy had. Or actually, I'm not going to lose the timing. It's all going to line up. I'm just not going to get the fidelity of what he originally had. And in video, they usually work at 48K. So I'm going to say don't convert for now. And there it is. Basically, that's what it looks like after you open it up. And you get, this is the OMF file as opened in Logic. So he had multiple tracks of audio going on in his session. Those tracks imported. It placed them in the right locations. And then it, right now they're at 44, but I happen to know that his sample rate is 48K. Okay? Now this comes to a point of when you're working in video, if you're working a picture, what questions do you ask? There's very, very, very important questions that you need to ask when it comes to working with people in video or TV or film or whatever. And that's, okay, you're giving me this reference file. The video, what is the frame rate? Okay? So if they shot it at 23.98, you want to make sure that you're playing your Logic session back at 23.98, according to the rule that we just talked about, right? Okay, if the camera caught it at this rate, you want to play it back at the same rate. So I happen to have asked this guy, I said, hey, what's the rate on this film? And he said, well, it's 23.976. So I go to synchronization in Logic. So that's right up here. And I go to 23.976. That way Logic's going to be playing back at the same frame rate as the picture. Okay? Now, the next thing is, we know that it didn't convert the sample rate on input. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Logic to match the sample rate of the audio. I happen to know from talking to the director that he likes to work at 48K. So I go to Settings, Audio, and I change this from 44 to 48. Now, when the audio came in, it was placed on a grid. This particular piece, just from looking at it, I see that it has bars and tone up front. Okay, so that's basically whenever you see the color bars on a television, it goes eeeeee for calibration. So that's going to be a lot of a really annoying tone that I'm not going to play for you right now. But then there should eventually be a little blip. That's called a 2-pop. A 2-pop denotes 2 seconds before film starts, okay? So when we talk about film, when we talk about movies or television or whatever, the first frame of the actual show or the actual, the actual show or the actual film or whatever starts at a time code of 1 hour, okay? It doesn't start at 0. It starts at 1 hour. The 2-pop is going to happen at 59:58. Okay, so that's 2 seconds before the actual picture starts. So that brings us to a conundrum, a bit of a conundrum about how we're setting up our session. Because here's the movie audio, right? Here's the 2-pop. I need everything to line up. I want that to be at 1 hour. And right now, what does my time code say? Well, if I right-click down here on the transport, and I say, open giant SMPTE display. This is how you impress your friends. You go down here and you open that, and then you open this, and then you open up another one, and then you put the movie in, and then you hit play, and all these numbers go by, and there's colors, and they're like, wow, man, you're like a real audio producer. So anyway, if you want to do that, that'll impress your friends. It won't get you a date though. So here we go. I want this to be at hour 1. Well, there's a couple different ways to do this. One thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to select all. I'm going to drag this over to 47. Put my playhead there. And grab this piece of audio. And it's giving me bars and beats. That's not all that great. If I go to timecode, there we go. So I'm going to make sure. Actually, no, I do want it in bars and beats. Sorry. Because I want this to be exactly at 47. Well, there's a number of different ways I could have done that a lot easier, but I'm just doing it this way. So I was moving it at a very small amount by holding down Control and Shift when I was moving it. Okay. So I'm going to do a save as because there's something going on here that's very, very dangerous. At the top of my screen, it says Untitled. If you see Untitled at the top of your screen, save immediately. Because basically what that means is you've started doing a bunch of work and you haven't saved. So if you see Untitled at the top of the screen, save now. So I'm going to save now. And I'm just going to call this OMF for now. So right now my time code doesn't line up. Whoa. If I go to my synchronization settings though, I should be able to say that bar position 47 equals hour 1. I'm going to go 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. Check that out. That's where the movie starts. If I go back to 5958, just grabbing the number. Okay. I should see. Hey, how about I use the zoom key command? There we go. That's the 2-pop. That's pretty darn close. So 5958 is where the 2-pop is. That's correct. The rest of my audio is at hour 1. All of the other audio is lined up and ready to go now. Now what I would do, to be very safe, I would select this all, region, lock SMPTE position. Everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. I don't want it to change. So I'm going to lock the SMPTE position. What does SMPTE stand for? Anybody know? That's not a Pyramind student. What does SMPTE stand for? Nope. If you're going to try and guess, it's just not. It's Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. So it's kind of funny because it's like your SMPTE is at blah, 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 but what you're saying is like the Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers is 1. You know, it's like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And no, it doesn't. But SMPTE is basically a format by which when we work in Logic and we think musically, we like to think in bars and beats and ticks, right? Bars, beats, division, tick, okay? So you have your bar, you have your beat. Your division is whatever you decide in Logic that you're working in, 16th notes, 8th notes, whatever. And then you have your tick, which is the finest division that you can get out of Logic, okay? So essentially now what I would do is I would bring in the movie and then I would try to get it to line up so that hopefully the video editor gave me a video 2-pop that I can line up with my audio 2-pop. So somewhere visually, you've seen it on TV sometimes where it goes 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, beep. And what's funny is when I was a kid, I was always like, where's 1? But, you know, my whole life defined by watching Sesame Street and seeing it, you know, why didn't it say 2? You know, anyway. So the idea is I can set my playhead to 5958. And what's funny is the way I just set my playhead, this is great because I know everything's lined up because I select that 2-pop region there and I hit Shift Return. My playhead automatically snaps to the front edge of that. I'm at 5958. I did good. Yay! Yay me. Now I can try and open the movie. And let's see, it's on my desktop somewhere. Probably in my presentation folder. And let's see, movie files. There it is. Open. So a video track comes in. Now, that does not look like a 2-pop. That looks like color bars. So when do I want this movie to start playing? Well, considering that this audio actually came from his OMF, I imagine that I'm going to get pretty close. If I click on this region here, where the color bars are, see this number, 5830.01? Because we know that this is basically where the video. Now, when I say picture start, this is where I can get really confusing, right? But hour 1 is where the actual film, the drama begins, right? The drama begins at hour 1. The boring, annoying, ear-splitting tones that you get at the beginning for calibration is going to happen at 58 minutes, 30 seconds, 0.01 frames. Now, 0.01, that's called a subframe. If you use other programs, you might not even see that. So 58:30:01. Now, if I right-click in the video window anywhere, I can get video project settings. Right now, it says movie start at hour 1. So it's going to try and start where its color bars at, where I have the drama starting. And instead of drama, I'm going to get color bars. Which, you know, if I was doing some kind of an art project, maybe that'd be interesting. Not. But I'm going to try moving this down to 58:30. 30. I'm going to see if that's close. Let's go back to the 2-pop. Look at that. I think I got it right. So that's the 2-pop. And then the video is going to start after that. So this was something I just wanted to go over real quick because, you know, people who are, I use Logic in just about every possible configuration and way that you can think of. And I just want to show you guys some things that when you're getting set up and getting into a project and thinking about how you're going to do things one thing at a time, like this stuff is really important. Like before you even start working, you need to know your frame rate. You need to know your sample rate. You need to know, you know, you have to know this information. And you need to know how to line your session up correctly so that when you actually start working, everything's going to line up correctly. And you're going to have the ability to deliver something that's really professional. There's nothing a video editor likes more than when you send him music that has a 2-pop at the beginning. Oh, wait a minute, how do you add the 2-pop? Well, it's pretty easy. You can just use the 2-pop that they gave you. That's usually what I do. It's like, he's used to that 2-pop. So what I'll do is I'll, no, I don't want a grand piano, thank you. I'm going to make a couple audio tracks. And just, that's not his 2-pop. This is his 2-pop. And then basically when I'm bouncing out my audio mix, I just leave these unmuted. I'd mute everything else, but then I would leave these unmuted. That way they get a 2-pop. You bounce it from roughly there, maybe a little bit before there. And then when the client gets their product, there's a couple things that you're covered now by. If you give them that 2-pop, if they do what we just did, but on the video side, so they take your audio and they see the little blip, and it comes up as this very sharp transient. And that's why they use something that goes blip really loud, because it's a very simple waveform and it's easy to see in a video editor. And they just line it up, and there you go. So that covers you, because you can say, well, did you line up the 2-pop? Well, then it should be synced. Because if it's not floating in your session and all of your stuff is straight, you've got your frame rate and all that stuff ironed out, it should be good on their end too. And that way you're covered. Because one thing that's really important when you're working, doing anything, is to make sure that you're giving people You're giving people stuff that they don't have to do anything special to make it work. That's why we do stems. That's why we bounce stems at the end of the last session, and that's why we would add a 2-pop to our music mix here if we were writing to picture. Okay? So does that make sense? That was the main thing that I wanted to talk about. I mean, there's other stuff too. Like, if I open up the global tracks by hitting G, and if I close this window, it's going to come up as this little, like, thumbnail on the upper left-hand side. And we can see that there are these thumbnails in the video track. Right now, the thumbnails are pretty arbitrary. But if I want to, I can say detect cuts, and Logic's going to run an algorithm to try and intelligently figure out where there are cuts happening in the movie. And if I go Option G, and I say, hey, show me a marker track. See, it didn't do such a good job this time. Yeah, it didn't catch any of the cuts. There must be a lot of fades. Must not be doing many hard cuts. Try and do it using the, if you use your cycle mode, then it'll try and detect cuts according to where the cycle mode is placed. Nope, it's not going to get it. But one thing you can do is if you're watching the movie and you get to what looks like a hard cut, like there, you can actually add your own marker in. And what's cool about that is that if you have a beat mapping track, it does this thing where in the beat mapping track, when you create markers, the markers show up on the beat marker track as well. That way you can adjust your grid to where that thing hits. So that if you have like 4 bars going by and you need it to hit right on that scene, it'll automatically adjust the tempo for you. So that's pretty cool.
If you change your tempo, and you have MIDI notes in there on some other tracks, the MIDI notes are going to stay in the same place, right? As long as SMPTE is locked.
Yes, if the SMPTE is locked, right. That's why if you were doing this, if you were using it to get to that scene, you would actually unlock the SMPTE so that it follows the tempo, so that when it hits, all the MIDI hits at the right time. Yeah. So anyway, that's kind of another neat use of marker video, the marker video and beat mapping track. It's kind of a neat way to use all those things in conjunction with each other. Okay, so that's the basic setup, and then you can just go to town and write for the piece. And some other time I'll actually score something in front of you, but I'm a little concerned about time. So any questions about this so far? Do you want me to? Yes. Hey, what's up, Zach?
Well, first we'll say manifest yesterday. Lance, no.
Holy smokes! Yeah, sorry, that was a deep bit of history.
But anyways, if you're locking at region and then you beat map and then you switch that so that it's at a different location on the beat map, how is that going to change? How is the audio going to be affected if it's locked?
Okay, if the audio is locked to a SMPTE position, then what you do in the beat map will not matter at all. It'll always play back at the same rate. Always.
Sure, but then if you're saying that the music's going to change, or you're just moving the music where it needs to go when you beat. So you beat map. So let's say that you go, okay, I'm bar 4 and want it right here, bam. So if you're putting music, if you're doing if the region, in other words, if it's locked, how can the music be affected?
The music, if it's in MIDI, will be locked to your the music. If it's a MIDI region, will be locked to the grid of Logic. In other words, if it's not locked to SMPTE, it's locked to tempo. So when you do the beat mapping, it's adjusting the tempo of the piece so that the MIDI will get faster or slower accordingly. So, for instance, if the question, as I understand it, is we're just trying to clarify when you're creating a new MIDI region, how does that follow? How does that follow tempo? And also audio as well. I mean, audio is in the same boat, but the audio would have to be flex timed in order for it to be locked. You see what I'm saying? So if your audio is in flex time mode, if your audio is on a flex time track that's already been analyzed, then it will also be malleable to tempo. But until you do that, if it's locked to SMPTE, that's what you get. You know,
So the lock point will not move, but it'll expand or contract from that point. So
well, actually, I don't know at that point. Like, if you lock the SMPTE, yes, that's going to be the left edge of the region. But the flex time, if it's flex timed, will the rest of it? My inclination. Now, actually, it won't. It absolutely will not. If you have your SMPTE position locked, even if you're in flex time, it will not follow tempo, because the whole point. It's like when you have MIDI. MIDI is going to be flexible as well if it's not locked to SMPTE. But if you lock it to SMPTE, then the individual events within that MIDI region will not move. So does that make sense? Okay, cool. And I was just going to try and do this thing real quick. That's pretty far away, though, isn't it? We can try it anyway. So if I want to record... Okay, whatever. So then I select the marker and pull this over here. And it does something really weird. I need to check and see in my tempo list. Yeah, it says at bar 47, it's at 120. I actually need to make sure, this is actually pretty important. I need to create another event at the beginning of my entire session that's at 120. Because what it tried to do is it switched tempo after 47, but the only previous tempo message that it had was at 47, not at 1. So that screwed up the entire thing. Or had the potential to, had I not used the omnipresent Command Z. See, there we go. That's what I want. The question is, can I get it even closer? Okay, first I have to delete this marker and this marker and this marker. And I have to say, let's do that again. Oh, I just erased the marker. I'm so good. Look how great I am. Awesome. All right, let's kill that. Got our marker. Oh, the marker's on the beat already. Just make sure that this is cool. I think I screwed up my video too, man. I did. I totally screwed up the video. That's all wrong. All right. So here's the here's the lesson to be learned. Basically, when you do this kind of thing, like if you're going to use beat mapping or if you're going to use a tempo track, make sure that at bar 1, you have your tempo set for the piece. Like in this case, I have it at 120. And then at the movie start, you should have another tempo marker, just a marker. So the beat mapping, when you do the beat mapping and it actually changes tempo, it has the proper sequence of tempo markers in place so that it works. Because now I have to go back and like redo all that crap that I did earlier. Which I'm not sure I want to take the time to do. But what the hell? Let's go back here. So once again, the way that we did it was we went back here. We got this number. Bada bing. Copy. Open this up. Right click. Video project settings. Click there. Right, paste. Return. Go back here. It should be our drama should start here. Let me go back to the 2-pop, and there it is. Yay! You do this enough time, hopefully you make things happen pretty quickly. But now we're back to normal again. And hopefully, sure, why not? That looks exactly like what he's playing on piano. All right, so let me go and find that, find this marker point. Oh shoot, that's where the cut is landing now. It's because, you see these here? These were the tempo markers that got placed when I did the beat mapping before. So now it's correct. So that's, if I was to get rid of these, I don't want to get rid of all of them, just that much. Let's put this one back at 120. Okay, so now this gets placed there. And then my MIDI is there. So then what should happen, if everything is good, go like that, and then it jumps over, and. Oh, but you see my MIDI? It's protecting my MIDI. So, let me do that again. There we go. So you see when I had that off, the MIDI shifted as well. If you hit protect MIDI, then that, it's kind of, I think it's kind of weird they call it protect MIDI. Because when you have it off, it actually shifts your MIDI around. But when you have it on, it actually keeps the MIDI on your grid. So that's kind of important as well. Yeah, it's locking, when you have it on, it's locking your MIDI notes to the grid of Logic. Okay? I meant to do that. So anyway, that's that.